Close your eyes. Now listen. That sound, that trembling cry wrapped in metal and breath, that's not just a harmonica. That's a man's soul trying to find its way home. His name was Little Walter, and he played like he was running out of time. Before the fame, before the Cadillacs, before the chaos, there was just a boy from Louisiana, born without a birth certificate, born without a chance. He didn't have much, but he had a sound, and that sound could shake a city in his hands. The harmonica stopped being a toy. It became a trumpet, a confession, a prayer that never made it to church. Every note was a bruise turned into beauty. Every breath, a story about the things he couldn't say out loud. When he came to Chicago, the world began to change. He plugged his harmonica into an amplifier and gave the blues electricity, gave it pulse, gave it power. He wasn't just playing music. He was rewriting what black pain could sound like. But the same fire that made him immortal was the one that burned him alive. He was a genius, a rebel, a man too tender for the world that worshipped his toughness. And when his heart finally gave out, at just 37, the world didn't weep loud enough. Because Little Walter didn't just change the blues, he became its heartbeat. And even now, if you listen close enough, you can still hear him breathe. He came into this world without a birth certificate, without a promise, and almost without a name. They called him Marion Walter Jacobs, but long before fame, he was just that boy with a harp, a restless child wandering through Louisiana dirt roads with more music than luck. Born in Marksville, Louisiana, sometime around 1930, Little Walter's life began like a verse out of an old blues song. A mother too young, a father too wild, and the world already whispering what he'd never be. His parents split before he could walk. Some said his mother abandoned him. Others said she was forced to, because the shame of bearing a child out of wedlock was heavier than love in those days. Either way, Walter grew up with the ache of absence, the kind of emptiness that turns into music. By the age of 8, he had found something that would fill that silence. A small, cheap harmonica. He'd heard hillbilly songs on the radio, Lonnie Glosson, Sonny Boy Williamson, and decided that if he couldn't afford a saxophone, he'd make this tiny piece of tin sound like one he practiced until his lips bled. He'd break his harmonicas, trying to bend notes they weren't built to reach, then fix them himself, learning breath, rhythm, and repair all at once. That's how he became more than a player. He became a mechanic of sound. A boy engineering his own salvation. His father, half black and half native, played guitar and accordion, and Walter got his fire from him. But fire runs wild in that bloodline. His father went to prison for murder, so did his uncle. By 12, Walter had seen enough violence to know that softness had no place in his world. He left school, left home, left safety-hopping trains north toward Chicago, chasing a city where the blues could make a man rich, or at least make him heard. He played on corners for change, sleeping in alleyways, carrying his harmonica like a weapon and a prayer. In the stations and juke joints along the way, Helena, Arkansas, Memphis, St. Louis, people started to notice him. They called him Little Walter because he was young, but his sound wasn't. He could make that harmonica sound like a trumpet, like a human voice, trying not to cry. When he finally made it to Chicago, in his early teens, he took whatever work he could laundry by day, street corners by night, and in that chaos of smoke and sirens, he found his purpose. Music wasn't a dream anymore. It was survival. It was how he fought back. It was how he prayed. No one could have known that this boy, born nameless in Louisiana, would soon change the sound of American music forever. But that's how legends begin, quietly, in pain, with nothing but breath and faith. By the time Little Walter reached Chicago's west side, he wasn't just another kid with a harmonica. He was a storm waiting to break. And when he met Muddy Waters, that storm finally had a stage. Muddy was already a name in the smoky clubs of Maxwell Street, tall, serious, and steady as a preacher. Walter was the opposite, fast, impulsive, burning at both ends. But when they played together, something miraculous happened. The harmonica stopped being a backdrop. It became the heartbeat of the blues. He plugged his small silver harp into an amplifier, something no one had dared to do before. The sound that came out was wild, rav, and holy, part thunder, part confession. It filled the clubs with electricity, and for the first time, people felt the harmonica instead of just hearing it. Night after night, they played until the floorboards shook. Walter's breath and Muddy's guitar melted into each other like gospel and sin. They called their group the Headhunters because they'd go to other clubs, outplay the house bands, and take their gigs. Chicago was alive. Then smoke, neon, rhythm, danger, and in the middle of it all stood a 20-year-old with a harmonica and a stare that could cut glass. When Walter recorded his first solo track, Your Cat Will Play producer Leonard Chess hesitated to release it. Who would buy a song with no lyrics? Just a man and his harmonica. But one afternoon, as the studio doors swung open, the music spilled into the street. People started dancing right there on the sidewalk. Women laughed, children clapped. That was all Leonard needed. He renamed it Juke. Within weeks, Juke was everywhere, blasting from radios, jukeboxes, car windows. 8 weeks at no. 1 on the R&B charts, 20 weeks on Billboard. No other harmonica song had ever done that before. Juke made Little Walter a legend. Soon came My Babe, You're So Fine, Blues with a Feeling. Every song sounded like sweat and salvation. His music built Chess Records into an empire, and his style inspired future giants, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, Eric Clapton, Elvis Presley. Everyone borrowed from him, even if they didn't say so. But success never softened him. He was still restless, still carrying that boy from Louisiana inside him, the one who played until his lungs hurt. He wore sharp suits, rode in Cadillacs, drank gin straight from the bottle. Crowds screamed his name. Women fought to get near him. Yet even then, there was sadness behind his grin, the kind that only a man who's outrun too much can wear. In those years, Little Walter had everything he thought he wanted: money, fame, music. But somewhere between the applause and the silence after every show, he started to realize the blues had given him the world and was already taking it back. Success came fast, and so did the fall. For Little Walter, fame wasn't freedom. It was another kind of cage, one lined with applause and loneliness. He had everything he thought he wanted: money in his pocket, Cadillacs in his driveway, and a crowd waiting for him every night. But the louder the music got, the quieter his life became. The streets that once cheered for him began to turn on him. So did his own demons. Walter was always quick-tempered. He'd grown up fighting, and success never taught him peace. Bar fights, jealous lovers, crooked cops. He met them all with the same rage that made him great on stage. They said he never backed down from anything. But sometimes, that's exactly what kills a man. He started drinking heavy gin, rum, moonshine, whatever burned. Then came the heroin. At first, it was to quiet his nerves between shows. Later, it was the only thing that could make the silence bearable. His bandmates left one by one, tired of the chaos, the short tempers, the unpaid nights. He'd replace them, then lose them again. Everyone loved his music. No one could live with a man. His body began to tell the story before he ever spoke of it. The scars on his face from fights, the limp from a bullet in his leg, the deep line above his brow from a wine bottle. A woman threw at him each mark another verse in a song about pain. In photos from those years, he still smiles, but his eyes have gone somewhere else, somewhere far away. By the mid-1960 seconds, the world had changed. Blues was fading from American radio. Rock and roll, built on his sound, had stolen the spotlight. He watched young white bands play his riffs to stadiums while he could barely fill a club. That kind of heartbreak doesn't show up on charts. He went overseas, played with the Rolling Stones, and for a moment, the light flickered again. But his drinking followed him. One night in London, drunk and angry, he tried to stab Rod Stewart with a knife. Even genius has limits. By the time he returned to Chicago, He was a man out of rhythm, lungs damaged, hands shaking, breath short. He was only 37, but he looked twice that, and still, he played. Because the stage was the only place where the world made sense, where pain became rhythm, where he could still pretend he was alive. But even the strongest lungs can't outrun the blues forever. And soon, the breath that once gave him everything would take it all away. When news of Little Walter's death reached Chicago in February 1968, it barely made the papers. No headlines, no tributes, just a few lines buried beneath the noise of a nation already drowning in war, riots, and assassinations. Another black man gone, another genius buried without applause. In America, the blues had already been repackaged, polished, and sold to a different face. White rock bands were playing the same licks Walter had bled for, but now the crowds were larger, the venues cleaner, the stories sanitized. The world still danced to his rhythm. It just didn't know it was his. That was the cruelest truth. The sound he invented, the breath that had built a new language of music, now belonged to someone else, to the Rolling Stones, Eric Clapton, Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, Elvis Presley, all of them influenced, inspired, or outright borrowing from the man the world forgot. Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf still carried the flame, but Walter was the ghost that haunted every note. In interviews years later, John Mayall, Mick Jagger, and Keith Richards all spoke about him like a myth. They called him the father of electric blues, the breath that made Chicago sound alive. But in the country of his birth, Walter's grave lay unmarked for more than 2 decades. No marble, no statue, just grass and silence. That's the story of so many black artists, creators of worlds that never belonged to them. They made the music that shaped America, but America never shaped a place for them. The same industry that made Chess Records rich barely kept its artists fed. Contracts were signed without lawyers, royalties withheld, dignity traded for studio time. The blues wasn't just a genre, it was an inheritance of struggle, a sound born from the ache of those who built everything and owned nothing. But outside America, it was different. In London, Paris, Berlin, Stockholm, people treated the blues like scripture. European students learned about Little Walter in music conservatories. Collectors hunted down every vinyl pressed with his name. British rock stars traced their roots straight back to him, calling him the man who gave music its breath. Over there, he was a legend. Back home, he was a footnote. It's a strange kind of irony that sometimes a man has to die for his country to hear him. And by the time America remembered Little Walter, it was too late to say thank you. In 1991, loyal fans raised money to finally mark his resting place. 3 decades after his death, they carved his name into stone so the world could see what it had ignored. Marion Walter Jacobs, the blues lives on. Later, Duke was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame, and The Best of Little Walter was ranked among Rolling Stone's 500 greatest albums of all time. A small redemption, a quiet correction. But maybe the real tribute isn't in awards or lists. It's in the air every time a harmonica bends a note that sounds just a little too human. That's him. Still breathing. Still here. Because you can bury a man, but you can't bury the sound of truth. They buried Little Walter on a gray February afternoon. No brass band. No church choir. Just a few friends. A cheap casket. And a silence that hung heavier than any song he'd ever played. The man who once made crowds scream had left this world without noise. But even then, even in death, the music didn't stop. It never does. For souls like his, because the truth is, Little Walter didn't die when they laid him in the ground. He died a little every night before that, in the bars, the back rooms, the broken moments where genius turns into exhaustion. But he also lived harder, brighter, and louder than most people ever dare. And maybe that's all art really is. A fight to live louder than your pain. In the years after his death, people tried to define him. Some said he was reckless. Some said he was doomed. But those who really listened, the ones who sat with the records, who felt that harmonica cut through their chest. They knew better. They knew that what came through that little piece of steel wasn't just sound. It was soul raw, flawed, human soul. He turned the harmonica into something holy. Before him, it was a pocket instrument, small, simple, forgettable. After him, it became a storm. He gave it lungs. He gave it grief. He gave it everything he had left to give. Every artist who ever bent a note in pain owes him something. Every kid who's ever played the blues in a small room, dreaming of being heard. That's his legacy. From Chicago to Mississippi to London, his breath still lingers, like a ghost that refuses to fade. And maybe the saddest, most beautiful thing about him is that he never learned how to separate the music from the man. He was the music, and the music, in the end, consumed him the same way fire consumes its brightest flame. But listen closely. Some nights, when the city is quiet and an old record spins, you can still hear him. A single note, drawn out just a little too long, trembling, aching, alive. That's not nostalgia. That's eternity. They said he lived fast and died young. Maybe, but legends don't die young. They die timeless. Because Little Walter didn't just play the blues. He taught the world what the blues meant. That pain can be art. That struggle can sing. That breath itself can be a revolution. So this is not a goodbye. It's a remembrance, a moment to breathe and listen and honor the man who turned a harmonica into a heartbeat. And if his story moved, you share it. Not for fame, not for numbers, but so that somewhere a young black boy with nothing but a dream might pick up a harmonica and remember that even broken lungs can still make music. He breathed pine into steel, and it came out as light.